The sun was beating down hard on the dusty trail as Jake rode his horse through the empty desert. He had been traveling for 3 days straight, and his water was running low. The Arizona Territory was no place for the weak, and Jake knew it better than most. He had been riding these trails for 15 years, ever since he left his family farm back in Missouri. His horse, a sturdy brown mare named Belle, was getting tired. Her steps were slower now, and Jake could see she needed rest. He was looking for a good spot to stop when he heard something that made his blood run cold. It was a woman's voice, weak and scared, calling out from somewhere in the canyon ahead. "Help me, please," she cried. "Someone, anyone, please help me." Jake pulled on Belle's reins and listened carefully. The voice came again, more desperate this time. "I'm trapped. I can't move. Please, if anyone can hear me, I need help." Now, Jake wasn't the type of man to ignore someone in trouble. His mother had raised him right, teaching him to always help those who needed it. But something about this situation felt strange. In all his years riding these trails, he had rarely seen another soul. The area was known for being dangerous, with steep cliffs and loose rocks that could kill a person in seconds. Still, the woman sounded genuinely scared. Jake made up his mind. He guided Belle toward the sound of the voice, moving carefully along the narrow path that led down into the canyon. As he got closer, he could see the scene more clearly. There, about 50 yards ahead, was an overturned stagecoach. The wooden wheels were broken and the coach was lying on its side like a wounded animal. Next to it was a large tree branch, probably knocked down by the recent storms. Under that branch was a young woman with long brown hair. She was wearing a blue dress that was torn and dirty. Her face was streaked with dust and she looked exhausted. When she saw Jake approaching, relief washed over her features. "Thank God," she called out. "I thought no one would ever come. I've been trapped here for hours. The stagecoach hit a rock and we crashed. This branch fell right across my legs. I can't move it by myself." Jake climbed down from Belle and walked toward the woman. As he got closer, he took in more details of the scene. The stagecoach looked like it had been expensive once, with fancy painted designs on the side, but now it was just a broken mess of wood and metal. "Where are the other passengers?" Jake asked, looking around. "And the driver?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. They didn't make it. The crash was so sudden. I was the only one who survived." She winced in pain as she tried to shift her position. "Please, sir, can you help me? This branch is so heavy and my legs are going numb." Jake nodded and moved toward the fallen branch. It was thick and looked heavy, but he had moved. Plenty of logs in his time. "Don't worry, miss, I'll have you free in no time." But as Jake bent down to grab the branch, something caught his eye. The ground around the stagecoach didn't look right. The dirt was too smooth in some places, like someone had been walking around and trying to arrange things. And the woman's dress, while torn and dirty, didn't look like it had been in a real crash. The tears seemed too neat, too planned. Jake straightened up and looked at the woman more carefully. She was pretty, probably in her 20s, with green eyes and smooth skin. But there was something about those eyes that bothered him. They didn't match her desperate words. Instead of fear and pain, there was something else there. Something calculating. "How long did you say you've been here?" Jake asked, not moving toward the branch. "Hours," she replied quickly. "Maybe 4 or 5 hours. I lost track of time. Please, you have to help me. I think my leg might be broken." Jake looked at the sun's position in the sky. If she had been here for 5 hours, she should be much more sunburned than she was. Her skin was pale, like she had been in shade most of the day. And her lips weren't cracked from thirst, even though she claimed to have been calling for help for hours in this heat. Something was very wrong here. Jake pretended to examine the branch more closely, but he was actually looking at the ground around it. That's when he saw them. Fresh boot prints in the sand. Not one set, but several. And they led away from the stagecoach toward a cluster of large rocks about 30 yards away. His heart started beating faster. This wasn't a rescue situation. This was a trap. Jake had heard stories about bandits who used tricks like this to rob travelers. They would set up fake accidents and use a woman as bait to lure good people into ambushes. He had never believed. The stories were true, but now he was living one. The woman was watching him closely now. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Why aren't you helping me?" Jake looked at her again, and this time he saw her clearly. Her dress might be dirty, but her hair was too clean. Her fingernails were perfect, not broken like they would be if she had really been clawing at a heavy branch for hours. And most, telling of all, there was no real panic in her voice anymore. She was trying to sound scared, but it felt like acting. "I'm just trying to figure out the best way to move this branch," Jake said, playing along while his mind raced. He needed to think fast. If this was really a trap, there were probably men with guns hiding behind those rocks, waiting for him to let his guard down. Jake slowly reached toward his gun belt, trying to make it look like he was just adjusting his position. The woman's eyes followed his movement, and he saw a flash of something, maybe anger, maybe fear, cross her face. "Please hurry," she said, and now her voice had a slight edge to it. "I'm in so much pain." But Jake had made up his mind. He wasn't going to fall for this trick. The question now was what to do about it. He was outnumbered and probably surrounded. His only advantages were that he knew it was a trap, and they didn't know that he knew. Jake stood up slowly and brushed the dust off his hands. "You know what?" he said in a casual voice. "I think I'm going to need some help with this branch. It's heavier than it looks. Let me go get my rope from my horse, and maybe we can rig up a pulley system." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "No, wait, you don't need rope. You're strong enough. Just lift it off me, please." But Jake was already walking back toward Belle. He could feel eyes watching him from the rocks. His skin crawled with the sensation of being in someone's gun sights. Every step felt like it might be his last. "I'll be right back," he called over his shoulder. "Just hang tight." As he reached Belle, Jake's mind was working furiously. He needed a plan, and he needed it fast. These people had clearly done this before, which meant they were organized and dangerous. But they had made one mistake. They had let him get close enough to his horse and his rifle. Jake reached up to his saddle and pulled out his Winchester rifle, trying to make the movement look casual. But as his hand closed around the weapon, he heard the woman's voice change completely. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Cowboy." Jake turned around slowly. The woman was no longer trapped under the branch. She was standing up completely free and pointing a small pistol directly at his chest. Her face had changed too. Gone was the scared, helpless expression. Now she looked cold and dangerous. "Drop the rifle," she commanded. "Do it now, or you'll be buzzard food before sunset." Jake's heart sank as he heard the sound of boots on gravel. Men were emerging from behind the rocks, just as he had suspected. 3 of them, all carrying guns, all pointed at him. They moved with the confidence of people who had done this many times before. The woman smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "Thanks for stopping to help, stranger. We really appreciate it. Now let's talk about what's in those saddlebags of yours." Jake stood perfectly still, his rifle halfway out of its holster. The 3 men had spread out around him in a half circle, their guns trained on him with practiced ease. These weren't desperate amateurs. They moved like soldiers, like men who had done this dance many times before. The woman walked closer to Jake, her small pistol never wavering from his chest. Up close, he could see that she was even prettier than he had first thought, but her beauty was cold now, like a snake's. Her green eyes held no warmth, no mercy. "I said drop the rifle," she repeated, her voice sharp as a blade. "Don't make me ask again." Jake slowly lowered the Winchester to the ground, his mind racing. He counted 4 guns against his 1 pistol, and they had the advantage of position. Belle was nervous, sensing the tension, and kept shifting her weight from foot to foot. "That's better," the woman said. She gestured to one of the men, a tall fellow with a black beard and cruel eyes. "Check his saddlebags, Tom. See what our Good Samaritan was carrying." Tom approached Belle carefully, keeping his gun pointed at Jake while he rifled through the leather bags tied to the saddle. Jake watched helplessly as the man pulled out his few possessions. Some jerky, a spare shirt, and a small leather pouch containing his last $20. "Not much here, Lily," Tom called out, shaking the money pouch. "Just some coins and a few bills, maybe $30 total." The woman, Lily, frowned. "That's it? No jewelry? No bank papers? No gold?" Afraid not, Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm just a working cowboy, don't carry much with me. One of the other men, short and stocky with a scar across his cheek, laughed harshly. Looks like we caught ourselves a poor one, boys. Barely worth the trouble. But Lily wasn't laughing. She studied Jake with those cold green eyes, like she was trying to see inside his head. You figured it out, didn't you? She said suddenly. Before I showed my hand, I could see it in your face. Jake didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Smart man, Lily continued, walking in a slow circle around him. Most people never catch on until it's too late. They're so eager to help a lady in distress that they walk right into our trap. But not you. What gave it away? Jake considered. Lying, but something told him the truth might serve him better. Your boot prints, he said. Too many of them and too fresh. Also, your dress was torn too neatly. Real accident damage looks different. The scarred man snorted. Listen to this one, thinks he's some kind of detective. But Lily looked almost impressed. Well, we might have underestimated you, cowboy. She stopped in front of him so close he could smell the soap she had used that morning. What's your name? Jake Morrison. Well, Jake Morrison, you've got good eyes. Maybe too good for your own safety. She glanced at her men. What do you think, boys? Should we just shoot him now and be done with it? Tom shrugged. Might be the smart thing to do. He's seen our faces, knows our methods. Could be trouble later. Jake's mouth went dry, but he forced himself to stay calm. Panic wouldn't help him now. You kill me, and my horse will run straight back to the last town. People will come looking when I don't show up. Nice try, the scarred man said. The scarred man. But we're not stupid. We'll just take your horse with us. Sell her in the next territory over. Belle whinnied nervously, as if she understood what they were talking about. Jake felt a stab of guilt for getting her into this mess. But as the men talked, Jake noticed something strange. Every few moments, Lily would glance toward a cluster of rocks off to her left. Not the same rocks where the men had been hiding, but a different group, further away, and each time she looked, her expression would change slightly, become worried, almost protective. Then Jake heard it, a sound so soft he almost missed it over the desert wind. Someone was crying. Quietly, trying not to be heard, but definitely crying. And it was coming from the direction Lily kept looking. There's someone else here, Jake said suddenly. All four outlaws tensed immediately. Tom and the scarred man swung their guns toward the rocks while the third man, who hadn't spoken yet, moved to cover them. What are you talking about? Lily snapped, but Jake could see fear in her eyes now. Someone's crying over there. Jake said, nodding toward the rocks. Behind those big stones. Sounds like a kid. Lily's face went pale. You don't know what you're talking about. But Jake was putting pieces together now. Lily's protective glances, the fear in her eyes, the way she had positioned herself between Jake and those rocks. That's why you do this, isn't it? Someone's making you. They've got someone you care about. Shut up, Lily hissed, raising her pistol higher. Just shut up right now. The crying sound came again, louder this time. Definitely a child, and definitely scared. Tom looked confused, glancing between Lily and the rocks. Lily? He said uncertainly. What's he talking about? Nothing, she said quickly. He's just trying to confuse us, trying to buy time. But Jake could see the truth now, written all over her face. It's your brother, isn't it? Or maybe your son. They're holding him to make sure you cooperate. I said, shut up, Lily screamed, and for a moment her mask slipped completely. Jake saw not a cold-blooded outlaw, but a terrified woman trying to protect someone she loved. The scarred man was looking suspicious now. Lily, what's going on? You said this was your idea, that you wanted in on our gang. It is my idea, she said, desperately. Jake's just trying to cause trouble between us. But Tom was already walking toward the rocks, his gun ready. Maybe I should go check just to be sure. No, Lily shouted, so loudly that her voice echoed off the canyon walls. Leave him alone. The words hung in the desert air like a death sentence. All three men turned to stare at her, and Jake saw the moment when they realized they had been played. Him? The scarred man said slowly. There is someone back there. Tom's face darkened with anger. You've been lying to us, haven't you? This whole partnership was a lie. Lily backed away from her supposed allies, her gun now swinging between them and Jake. Please, she said, and now her voice was shaking. You don't understand. He's just a boy. He's only 12 years old. Your boy? Tom asked. My brother, Lily whispered. My little brother. Our parents died of fever last winter. He's all the family I have left. Jake felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. This wasn't a willing partnership at all. These men had probably found Lily and her brother starving somewhere, maybe offered them food and shelter. Then, when they discovered how pretty Lily was, they had figured out a way to use her. So you've been working with us under threat, Tom said, his voice deadly calm. And you were planning to what? Escape with your brother at the first chance? Lily didn't answer, but her silence was answer enough. The scarred man laughed, but it was an ugly sound. Well, that changes things, doesn't it, boys? Seems like our little partner here has been planning to double-cross us all along. From behind, the rocks, the crying grew louder. A young voice called out, Lily? Lily, what's happening? I'm scared. And that's when Jake made his decision. Whatever happened next, he wasn't going to let these animals hurt a child. The moment Jake heard that scared child's voice, something changed inside him. He had been calculating odds, looking for his best chance to escape. But now escape wasn't enough. He couldn't ride away knowing these men had a 12-year-old boy, Tom, was still walking toward the rocks, his gun drawn and ready. Let's go meet this little brother of yours, Lily. Maybe it's time he learned what happens when people lie to us. Please, Lily begged, tears now streaming down her face. He hasn't done anything wrong. He doesn't even know what's been happening. I told him I was working as a cook for you men. The scarred man, who Jake was beginning to think was the real leader of this group, smiled coldly. Well, now he's going. To learn the truth, isn't he? That's when Jake saw his chance. All three men were focused on Lily and the drama unfolding around her brother. For just a moment, their attention was divided. Jake suddenly dove to his left, rolling behind Belle, while grabbing for his Colt revolver. The move caught everyone by surprise. Tom spun around, firing wild, but his shot went high. The scarred man cursed and tried to get a clear shot, but Belle was between them now, rearing up and whinnying in fear. Get him! The scarred man shouted. But Jake was already moving. He grabbed a handful of desert sand and flung it hard at the third outlaw who had been trying to circle around behind him. The sand hit the man square in the eyes, and he stumbled backward, clawing at his face. Jake's Colt was in his hand now, and he put his first shot into Tom's shoulder, spinning the big man around and sending his rifle flying. The scarred man fired back, but Jake was already rolling again, using the overturned stagecoach for cover. Lily, get to your brother, Jake shouted as bullets whined overhead. Get him out of here. But Lily was frozen, caught between wanting to help Jake and needing to protect her brother. The third outlaw had cleared his eyes and was bringing his gun up again when Jake put a bullet into his leg, dropping him to the ground. The scarred man ducked behind one of the large rocks and called out, You can't win this, cowboy. Even if you get all of us, there are more coming. Our boss will be back with the rest of the gang before sunset. Jake's blood ran cold. More outlaws were coming. How many more? Lily, he called. How many men are we talking about? Lily looked torn, but finally answered. 8 more, maybe 9. They went to scout the main road for wagon trains. Jake cursed under his breath. Even if he managed to defeat these 3, he'd never be able to handle a dozen armed outlaws, and they couldn't just run away. Not with a 12-year-old boy to slow them down. Tom was crawling toward his dropped rifle, his wounded shoulder leaving a trail of blood in the sand. Jake put another shot near his head, making him think twice about that plan. Listen to me, Jake shouted to all of them. This doesn't have to end with everyone dead. Lily, what do these men really want from you? They want me to keep playing bait, she called back, her voice shaking, until they've robbed enough travelers to make it worth heading south to Mexico. And what happens to you and your brother? After that, there was a long silence. Then Lily's voice came back, barely audible. They haven't said, but I don't think they plan to let us go. The scarred man laughed harshly from behind his rock. Smart girl, we can't have witnesses walking around, can we? Jake felt anger building in his chest like a fire. These weren't just thieves. They were killers planning to murder a woman and child once they were done using them. Lily, Jake called. Out, making up his mind. I'm going to try something. When I give you the signal, you grab your brother and run for those rocks over there. He pointed to a cluster of boulders about 50 yards away. Stay low and don't look back. What are you going to do? Jake checked his ammunition. 4 bullets left in his Colt plus a full reload in his gun belt. Not much against these odds, but it would have to be enough. Something stupid, probably, he muttered to himself. Then louder, Hey, scarred face, you want to know why I was really riding through this territory? Don't care, cowboy. You'll be dead in a few minutes anyway. I'm a bounty hunter, Jake lied smoothly. Been tracking a gang that's been robbing stagecoaches in this area. Gang led by a man with a scar on his face. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? There was a pause. Then, you're lying. Am I? Check my saddlebags again. There's a false bottom with wanted posters inside. Your face is on one of them. $500 reward, dead or alive. Jake heard whispered conversation from behind the rocks. He was making this up as he went along, but it seemed to be working. Outlaws were always paranoid about bounty hunters. Even if that's true, the scarred man called back. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Those posters won't do you any good when you're dead. Maybe not, Jake agreed. But I already sent word to the sheriff in Tucson before I rode out here. Told him exactly where I was heading and when I'd be back. If I don't show up by tomorrow morning, he's coming with a posse. 20 men, all armed with rifles. This was also a lie, but Jake delivered it with complete confidence. The truth was, nobody knew where he was or when he'd be back, but he needed these men to believe their time was running out. More whispered conversation from behind the rocks. Jake used the distraction to signal to Lily, pointing toward the rocks where her brother was hiding, and then toward their escape route. Lily nodded and started moving carefully toward her brother's hiding spot. But just as she reached the rocks, Tom managed to grab his rifle with his good arm. Boss, Tom shouted. The woman's trying to get to the kid. The scarred man popped. Up from behind his cover, gun blazing, Jake returned fire, but he was running low on ammunition and the range was getting difficult. One of his shots sparked off the rocks near the scarred man's head, making him duck back down. Lily, go now, Jake yelled. But as Lily emerged from behind, the rocks with a thin, scared-looking boy in tow, the third outlaw, the one Jake had shot in the leg, managed to get back on his feet. Blood was streaming down his leg, but he could still stand and he still had his gun. The wounded man lined up his sights on Lily and her brother as they ran for cover. Jake saw what was happening and knew he couldn't make the shot from his position, behind the stagecoach. The angle was all wrong and the wounded outlaw was too far away. So Jake did the only thing he could think of. He stood up and ran straight at the man, shouting at the top of his lungs and firing as he went. The wounded outlaw, startled by Jake's sudden charge, swung his gun toward this new threat. His shot went wide, kicking up sand near Jake's feet. Jake's return shot didn't miss, but Jake's heroic charge left him exposed in the open desert, with no cover between him and the other two outlaws. The scarred man saw his opportunity and took it, rising up with his rifle aimed at Jake's back. Time seemed to slow down as Jake heard the distinctive sound of a rifle being cocked behind him. Jake heard the rifle cock behind him and knew he was about to die. He was caught in the open, no cover within reach, facing the wrong direction. The scarred man had him dead to rights, but the shot that rang out didn't come from behind him. It came from the side, and when Jake spun around, he saw the scarred man stumbling backward, clutching his gun arm. Blood was seeping through his fingers. Standing on top of one of the large rocks, holding a small rifle that looked too big for his thin frame, was Lily's brother. The boy couldn't have been more than 12 years old, just like Lily had said, but his hands were steady and his eyes were determined. "Nobody hurts my sister," the boy said in a voice that tried to sound brave but still cracked with fear. The scarred man roared in pain and anger. "You little brat! I'll kill you for that!" But Tom, despite his wounded shoulder, was already moving. He had managed to pick up his rifle and was swinging it toward the boy. "Kid made a big mistake showing himself," Tom grunted. Jake didn't hesitate. He put his last bullet into Tom's chest, dropping the big man for good. But now his Colt was empty, and he could hear the scarred man fumbling for his dropped gun with his good hand. "Boy, get down," Jake shouted as he ran toward his rifle, which was still lying where he had dropped it earlier. The scarred man found his pistol and raised it toward the boy, but Lily appeared from behind the rocks like an avenging angel. She had picked up a heavy stone and brought it down hard on the outlaw's head. The man collapsed unconscious but still breathing. For a moment the desert was quiet except for the sound of everyone breathing hard. Jake reached his rifle and quickly checked to make sure all the threats were down. Tom was dead, the leg-shot outlaw was unconscious and bleeding badly, and their leader was out cold with a good-sized bump on his head. "Is everyone okay?" Jake called out. Lily was holding her brother tightly, checking him over for injuries. The boy, who looked like a younger, thinner version of his sister, was trying to act tough but was clearly shaken. "We're fine," Lily called back. "But Billy, what were you thinking? You could have been killed." "I wasn't going to let them hurt you," Billy said stubbornly. "You've been taking care of me since Mom and Dad died. Now it's my turn to protect you." Jake walked over to them, reloading his Colt as he went. Up close, he could see that both siblings were thinner than they should be. Their clothes were worn and patched, and they had the look of people who had been living rough for a while. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Jake asked Billy. "Our dad taught us both," the boy replied. "Said we needed to know how to take care of ourselves out here." "Your dad was a smart man," Jake said. Then to Lily, "How long have these men been holding you?" Lily sat down heavily on a rock, suddenly looking exhausted. 3 weeks, she said. "We were traveling to California, hoping to find work. We ran out of food and money in a little town called Copper Creek. These men found us there, said they'd help us if I worked for them for a while." "And you believed them?" "I was desperate," Lily said, tears starting to flow again. "Billy was so hungry, and we had nowhere else to go. They said all I had to do was help them get travelers to stop and help. They said they were just going to rob people, not hurt anyone." Jake nodded grimly. "But they started talking about what would happen when they were done with you." "Yes. Last night I heard them planning. They were going to kill us both once they had enough money to head south. They said we knew too much about their methods." Billy looked shocked. "They were going to kill us, but they said they were our friends." "No, sweetheart," Lily said, stroking his hair. "They were never our friends. They were using us." Jake walked over to check on the unconscious outlaws. The leg-shot one was still breathing but had lost a lot of blood. He'd live, but he wouldn't be going anywhere soon. The scarred leader was starting to stir, moaning softly. "We need to tie them up," Jake said, "and we need to figure out what to do about those other gang members who are supposed to come back." "How many did you say?" Jake asked Lily. 8 or 9. They left this morning to scout for wagon trains on the main road. They weren't supposed to be back until sunset, but that's only about 2 hours from now. Jake looked around the canyon, thinking fast. Even with the element of surprise, he couldn't take on 8 or 9 armed men, not with 2 civilians to protect. They needed to get out of here, but they also couldn't just leave these unconscious outlaws to rejoin their gang later. "Is there anywhere around here we could hide?" he asked. "Somewhere the rest of the gang wouldn't think to look?" Billy perked up. "There's an old mine shaft about a mile north of here. Lily and I found it a few days ago when they sent me to gather firewood. Is it big enough for all of us, including the horses?" "I think so. It goes pretty deep into the mountain, but—" "Jake?" Lily hesitated. "What about these men? We can't just leave them here." Jake had been thinking about the same thing. If they left the outlaws here, the returning gang members would find them and know something had gone wrong. But they couldn't take unconscious men with them either. "Actually," Jake said slowly, "maybe we can use this to our advantage." "What do you mean?" Jake walked over to where the outlaws' horses were tied up behind some rocks. 3 good-looking animals, well-fed and strong. How well do you know the area around that mine? Pretty well, Billy said. We've been exploring while we were waiting. Good. Here's what we're going to do. Jake began untying the outlaws' horses. We're going to take these men with us to the mine. Then we're going to set a trap for their friends. Lily looked confused. What kind of trap? Jake smiled grimly. The kind that uses bait. Just like they've been doing. Except this time, we're going to be the ones waiting in ambush. That sounds dangerous, Lily said. It is dangerous, Jake agreed. But it's our best chance. If we just run away, these men will eventually track us down. They know this territory better than we do, and they have more men. Our only hope is to turn the tables on them. Billy was looking excited now. Like what I did with the rifle, an ambush. Exactly like that, but bigger and with more planning. Jake looked at both siblings seriously. But I need to know, are you two willing to take this risk? Because once we start this plan, there's no going back. We'll either stop this gang for good or we'll die trying. Lily finished quietly. Jake nodded. I won't lie to you, it's dangerous. But if we do nothing, you'll spend the rest of your lives running from these men. And there are other innocent people they'll hurt if we don't stop them. Lily looked at her brother, then back at Jake. Billy and I have been running for 3 weeks. I'm tired of being scared all the time. If you think we can really end this, then let's do it. Billy nodded eagerly. I want to help. These men are bad, and someone needs to stop them. Jake felt a surge of respect for both of them. They had every reason to just want to escape, but they were willing to take a stand. All right then, let's get these men tied up and head to that mine. We have a lot of work to do before sunset. The old mine shaft was perfect for their plan. It tunneled deep into the mountainside, with several side passages that branched off from the main tunnel. Most importantly, it had 2 entrances. The main one that was easy to find, and a smaller, one that Billy had discovered on the far side of the mountain. Jake and the siblings spent the next hour setting up their trap. They tied the 3 captured outlaws in one of the side passages, far enough back that they couldn't be heard but close enough that they could be watched. The leg-shot man was unconscious from blood loss, but the other 2 were awake and very unhappy about their situation. You're making a big mistake, Cowboy, the scarred leader growled through his gag. When my boys get back and find us missing, they'll hunt you down like dogs. That's exactly what I'm counting on, Jake replied calmly as he checked the man's bonds. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would leave obvious signs that someone had been at the original canyon site, scattered belongings, blood trails, horse tracks leading toward the mine. When the other gang members returned and found their partners missing, they would follow the trail straight into Jake's trap. Lily would wait at the back entrance with the horses, ready to escape if things went wrong. Billy, despite his sister's protests, would be positioned where he could watch the main entrance and warn Jake when the outlaws arrived. Jake would be in the main tunnel with his rifle, using the narrow passages and rocky cover to even the odds. I still don't like this, Lily said as they finished their preparations. You're putting yourself in terrible danger for people you barely know. Jake checked his rifle one more time. My father always told me that a man is measured by what he's willing to fight for. These outlaws have been terrorizing innocent people, and they were planning to kill you and your brother. That makes it my business. Billy came running back from the main entrance where he had been keeping watch. Jake, I can see dust clouds on the horizon. Riders, maybe 8 or 9 of them, heading this way fast. Jake felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his voice calm. All right, everyone knows their positions. Lily, you get to the back entrance with the horses. Billy, you stay hidden, but where you can see the entrance. If this goes wrong, you both get out of here and ride hard for the nearest town. What about you? Lily asked. I'll be right behind you, Jake lied smoothly. The truth was, if this plan failed, he probably wouldn't be leaving this mine alive, but he wasn't going to tell them that. 20 minutes later, Jake heard horses approaching. The mine entrance. Voices carried clearly in the desert air. Trail leads right here, boss. Looks like whoever hit our camp brought Tom and the others into this old mine. How many tracks? The voice was deep and rough, clearly the gang leader. Hard to say for sure. Maybe 3 or 4 riders. Could be a posse. Jake smiled grimly. Actually, it was just one cowboy and 2 scared kids, but he had done his best to make it look like more. All right, boys, light some torches and let's go get our people back. Stay sharp, this could be an ambush. Jake had to admire their caution. These were experienced men who understood the dangers of going into an enclosed space where enemies might be waiting. Unfortunately for them, Jake had been planning for this. The first outlaw to enter the mine was carrying a torch, which meant he couldn't see into the dark corners where Jake was hiding. But Jake could see him perfectly. The man was tall and thin, with a nervous way of moving that suggested he didn't like being underground. Jake let him pass. And the second man. And the third. He wanted as many of them as possible inside the mine before he made his move. When the 5th man entered, Jake made his decision. He stepped out from behind a large rock formation and called out in a loud, clear voice, "That's far enough, gentlemen." The outlaws spun around, guns drawn, but in the narrow tunnel they couldn't spread out effectively. Jake had chosen his position. Well, he had cover and they were bunched up in the open. "Drop your weapons," Jake commanded. "You're outnumbered and outgunned." The gang leader, a big man with a gray beard, laughed harshly. "I count 8 of us and 1 of you, friend. I like our odds better." "Look again," Jake said calmly. That's when Billy stepped into view at the mine entrance, silhouetted against the daylight with his rifle ready. At the same moment, Lily appeared at the other end of the tunnel, having circled around through the back entrance. She was also armed, carrying one of the captured outlaws' guns. The gang leader's confidence wavered slightly. "Still 8 against 3, and 2 of yours are just kids. Those kids have already put 3 of your men out of action," Jake pointed out. "And they're not afraid to pull the trigger. Are you willing to bet your life that they'll miss?" For a moment, the mine was silent except for the sound of men breathing hard and the occasional drip of water from the rock ceiling. Jake could see the outlaws weighing their options. They were professional criminals used to having the advantage of numbers and surprise. This situation was all wrong for them. "Besides," Jake continued, "even if you kill all 3 of us, do you really want to explain to the territorial marshal why you were carrying torches into an old mine shaft? Funny thing about mines. Sometimes they have pockets of bad air. One spark in the wrong place." This was another bluff, but it was a good one. Everyone knew that old mines could be dangerous, filled with explosive gases that could be ignited by a torch or a muzzle flash. The gang leader was starting to sweat now. "What do you want?" "I want you to drop your guns and surrender. All of you. You're going to ride with me to the nearest town where you'll be turned over to the proper authorities. And if we refuse?" Jake's voice went cold. "Then we do this the hard way. Your choice." One of the younger outlaws, a boy who couldn't have been much older than Billy, started to lower his gun. "Maybe we should listen to him, boss. This don't feel right." "Shut up, Kenny," the gang leader snapped, but Jake could see doubt creeping into the man's eyes. That's when the scarred leader, who Jake thought was safely tied up in the side passage, came stumbling out of the shadows. He had somehow managed to work free of his bonds, and he was carrying a large rock in his good hand. "Look out!" Lily screamed. The scarred man brought the rock down hard toward Jake's head. Jake dodged to the side, but the rock caught him on the shoulder, sending him sprawling. His rifle went flying into the darkness. Suddenly, the mine erupted into chaos. The gang leader shouted, "Get them!" and his men started shooting. But in the narrow tunnel with torchlight creating wild shadows, it was almost impossible to tell who was shooting at whom. Jake rolled behind a rock pile, fumbling for his Colt. A bullet sparked off the stone near his head. Across the tunnel, he could see Lily pressed against the wall trying to stay out of the line of fire. Billy was still at the entrance, and Jake could see him taking careful aim with his rifle. The boy fired once, and one of the outlaws cried out and went down. But there were still too many of them, and they were starting to spread out through the tunnel. That's when Jake remembered something Billy had mentioned earlier. The mine had been abandoned because it was unstable. Old wooden support beams held up the ceiling in several places, and some of them looked pretty rotten. Jake drew his Colt and aimed not at the outlaws, but at one of the largest support beams, near the tunnel entrance. The old wood splintered under his bullet and he heard an ominous creaking sound from overhead. "Everyone out!" Jake yelled. "The tunnel's coming down!" For a moment, nobody moved. Then small rocks started falling from the ceiling, and everyone could hear the groaning of stressed timber. The outlaws panicked. They ran for the entrance, pushing and shoving each other in their desperation to get out. Jake grabbed Lily's hand and pulled her toward the back entrance, shouting for Billy to follow them. Behind them, they could hear the rumble of falling rocks as part of the tunnel collapsed. Dust filled the air, and for a few terrifying seconds, Jake thought they might all be buried alive. But they made it to the back entrance just as the main tunnel gave way completely. The sound was like thunder echoing off the mountains. When the dust settled, the mine entrance was completely blocked by tons of rock and debris. Jake, Lily, and Billy stood outside in the desert air, coughing and covered in dust, but alive. "What about the outlaws?" Billy asked. Jake listened carefully. He could hear voices from the other side of the rock fall, angry voices, but alive voices. "They're trapped, but they're not hurt. Someone will dig them out eventually, but it'll take days. Long enough for us to get to town and bring back the marshal." Lily was staring at the blocked mine entrance. "Is it really over?" "It's over," Jake confirmed. "At least for this gang. They won't be hurting anyone else." 2 hours later, as the sun was setting over the desert, Jake was preparing to say goodbye to Lily and Billy. The 3 captured outlaws were tied securely to their horses, and Jake had enough evidence to ensure they'd all hang for their crimes. The gang trapped in the mine would be dealt with once the authorities arrived. "What will you do now?" Jake asked the siblings. "We're still going to California," Lily said. "We'll find work there, make a new start." She paused, then added quietly, "Jake, I can never repay you for what you've done for us.